Pittsburgh Steelers fans, welcome into another edition of the Steelers Q&A. Oh man, forgot to stop the music. My bad. Let's pause this here. And welcome into the show. Apologies about that. Hope you could hear me anyway. But hey, we're here. We're live. It's Jeremy Betts with you here on the Steelers Q&A. Sunday night again. Conference championships are underway. No spoilers, please. I'm not watching the game right now. I'm going to go back to it later. So let's keep the game scores out of the comments here. Just kidding. If you need to talk about it, let's do it. I've got a special guest with me today. I really enjoy having Daniel on the show as always. Daniel, how you doing, man? Thanks for coming on.
I'm doing well, man. Just kind of here enjoying the Sunday. Watched a little bit of football, a little bit of stress-free football. Unfortunately, it's not the Steelers, but
Right.
it is what it is. It was a good day, man. Enjoyed watching this game that's currently going on right now.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun to watch, and as Steeler fans, most of us are probably very excited that the Baltimore Ravens took a dirt nap on Sunday afternoon and are not in the championship game in the Super Bowl. A lot of Steeler fans understandably have kind of tired of the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm one of those people. They've been doing this a long time, but again, you're watching greatness too, and that's something to watch as well, and something to enjoy. I don't know how you are, Daniel, as kind of more of a global football fan or Pittsburgh Steelers only, but getting a chance to watch guys perform at the highest level is pretty awesome to watch as well. Even if it's not your team, it does hurt if it's not your team. But getting to watch some of these guys play has been a lot of fun. What do you think?
Oh yeah, for sure. And me, I'm mainly Steelers centric, but for the most part, but I do enjoy watching some of the other teams that are out there. I know, majority of some of the players that are out there, especially here in the playoffs, these are some of the better teams in the league. So I can kind of tell you a little bit about their stars, so to speak. But yeah, up to this point, just kind of watching these games and these teams, kind of lets you measure up how far maybe the Steelers are from being a team that could be in one of these championship games in the next few years.
Yeah, it does. It gives you a kind of a clear understanding of kind of what you need to be in that spot. And I think that most of us would agree. Offensively, you really just need a transcendent quarterback or you need a transcendent play caller. One of the two, an offensive scheme that leads you both places. But I mean, defense has kind of been the story too of the year with the way the Kansas City Chiefs have played on defense. When you talk about what got them to the Super Bowl, I would say that it was more that defense than it was even Patrick Mahomes being great. But you did see big plays out of them. So there's just a depth and technique and just how far some of these teams are away from what we've seen from the Steelers the past few years, and the philosophy, or not the philosophy, but the culture in big game moments has to change as well. You've got to be able to rise up in big games, and I think that that's where we're seeing some separation. But I just think that when you're talking about this Pittsburgh Steelers team and where they're at right now, they've got a lot of questions, and we're going to get to some of those tonight. And the ongoing conversation really right now is about the offensive coordinator. What's the offense going to look like? Who are the Steelers going to bring in? News broke today on Sunday that the Steelers did interview Arthur Smith for that offensive coordinator position. Go ahead and give us your thoughts on that, Daniel, before we get into the questions on the live chat.
I think the Steelers are going to kind of work this out the same way that they worked out the last time there was an offensive coordinator position open, and that is they're going to bring in quite a few people.
Yes.
Even though they had Matt Canada as the guy the last time, and they knew they were going to go that way, there were several candidates that had came in that time as well. So even if they have somebody they have their eye on, or that they've already selected and think that maybe that's going to be our offensive coordinator, they're going to do their due diligence and go through those that are available. To me, I think that if they end up landing on an offensive coordinator, if there's an interview and they get into the building, if that person's going to be the OC, they're not walking out of the building not the OC. So the fact that he left and he's not the offensive coordinator, um, I don't think so. I think they're waiting on maybe one of these guys that are currently coaching still. I think that there's been a lot of, rumors about Kubiak, 49ers, stuff like that. So, yeah, we'll see what happens after this game.
We will, absolutely. There's going to be plenty more news in this regard. When it comes to Arthur Smith specifically, a lot of fans are going to have mixed feelings because you talk about a guy who in Tennessee led an offense that went to an AFC championship game. They were a run heavy offense that made things easy on their quarterback through play action. They did have a star wide receiver in AJ Brown at that time and a stud running back in Derrick Henry, and an offensive and defensive lines specifically that were really, really good that year. They made games ugly like the Steelers like to do. And their offense was a little bit more explosive than anything we've seen from the Pittsburgh Steelers the last few years. So a lot of Steelers fans look back at that and say, well, when he was an OC, it looked pretty good. And then some of us, we look at the Falcons tenure and how some of his stars would just disappear at times. And it felt like the game plans were just not quite there. And that he wasn't able to elevate his quarterback play. So I think a lot of Steelers fans are going to have mixed feelings about that, but he is a guy with experience. He is a guy with a track record of putting together offenses that compete in big games. So I think that plays into this whole conversation here.
For me, I think that maybe perhaps those two guys can, I don't know if they're going to end up keeping Eddie Faulkner or not, but if they don't, I think those guys might be candidates for the running game coordinator. In Tomlin's post-year press conference, when asked about the offensive coordinator position and the influence on the quarterback position that he wants, he said to me, at least, it appeared that he wanted an offensive coordinator that was that more of that was the passing game was more of their expertise. It's kind of the sense that I got. And with Arthur Smith and the gentleman out of Carolina, Brown, I believe is his last name, Thomas Brown.
Yeah, Thomas Brown. Yeah.
I believe that those two guys have more of a, they got more of a background in the running game aspect of it. And so I'm not sure if they're going to fit the mold, so to speak, but I don't think that when Mike Tomlin went in for his interview that he was, a guy that the Steelers were probably, looking at. I think he knocked them off their, knocked stocks and history was made.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's plenty of candidates out there that aren't flying high on the radar. They're flying under the radar. And so you're talking about a guy like Gerard Johnson, who came in. That's a guy that kind of out of left field a little bit. But, when you talk about guys who have put together good seasons for a young quarterback, he's definitely at the top of the list when you look at what CJ Stroud looked like this year. And, a lot of that can be attributed to Bobby Slowick as well. But that's a team effort. All the coaching is a team effort when you're on an offensive side of the ball. And I think a guy with quarterback experience definitely has a play in that. It is going to be very interesting to see how they go, because Tomlin mentioned, yes, we're going to add an offensive coordinator, obviously, but also open to adding other coaching positions on that side of the football to improve the overall flow of the game. I think that could be a big deal. And with Mike Sullivan getting interviews out and about, I don't think he's coming back. Obviously, that would have been a stretch for him anyway with a new offensive coordinator coming in. But I think that he's good as gone. So you're probably looking at getting an OC and a new QB coach right off the bat, and then seeing how that all flows. Maybe if the offensive coordinator comes in and he has a certain way he likes to see the offense blocked and schemed up on the offensive line, maybe the Steelers change offensive line coaches. So there's still a lot of questions to be answered here. And it all starts with getting that coordinator in the building. Let's throw up a question here from Jeremiah Yoder. Thanks, Jeremiah. It says, hello there, Jeremy. What's your feeling about our Pittsburgh Steelers going forward? Looking forward to seeing our Steelers in another championship game. I hope sooner than later. I hope so too. Daniel, what's your feeling about the Pittsburgh Steelers going forward? Do you think that they're maybe a few players and a good offensive system away from being able to contend for this for an AFC championship, or are they a little bit further away in your mind?
I mean, I think that there's some players that could make some jumps that are currently on the team that could
Mm-hmm.
improve, this team without having to add certain players. Maybe even move some individuals. I'm not sure if, maybe moving a Broderick Jones to the left side. I know that Chixokofor is still, on the roster for next year. Perhaps you get something for him in a trade, and you can fill in that spot there. But I think there's a lot of holes on this team, a lot of holes, especially on the defensive side. I think that the inside defensive lineman, that's a big question mark. Larry Ogunjobi's been injured his entire tenure with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's played through injury, and we haven't seen 100% of him. But with it's starting to become the consistent thing is that we're not going to see the 100% of him. Cam Hayward, he's getting up there in age, and DeMarvin Leal's probably 1 foot out the door already if he doesn't show something this offseason, and so or in training camp. So I think that's a question mark. The middle linebacker position is a question mark. Cole Holcomb suffered a very major leg injury as well. It wasn't something that was a sprained ankle or anything like that. It required surgery, and who knows if he's coming back the same. He had been having injuries prior to that. Elandon Roberts is a guy that, I think he's probably, I'm not sure even if he's under contract, but if he is, he's up there in age as well. And he's a little bit of a liability in the passing game. Mark Robinson isn't the, a guy that I think you can lean on. So the middle linebacker position is still very much a question mark. And then you also have the safety position alongside Minka, and also another cornerback position alongside Joey Porter. So I think that, is it possible that they can go in and fill all these positions and everything work great, whether it's in the draft and free agency? Maybe, but it's a lot of holes, in my opinion, to fill up that you're going to be able to really contend unless you're real healthy throughout the year.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm kind of the opinion that it depends on the players you're talking about. There are support pieces, obviously, that you need. I think that if the Steelers somehow, some way landed or found a top 10 quarterback this offseason, then you change the narrative a little bit there, because you've got all of a sudden a guy who can be a reason you win, and not just a reason you don't lose. If that makes sense. There's a difference there. And so if it's Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph that come back next year, and we'll get to some Mason Rudolph questions here in a second, then I think that you're in a spot where you just don't know. And if one of those guys makes the leap and starts playing like a top 15, top 10 quarterback, then maybe you can put yourself in the conversation for divisional round or championship round contest potentially. But like you said, I'm working on an article right now talking about the players side of the ball, or side of the team, and how they need to address this offseason to become a contender, and not just a competitive team that if they get to the playoffs, there nobody really takes them seriously, because they're just not quite up there with the other teams that made it alongside them. And so a lot of what I'm focusing on is the middle of that defense, and it's from front to back, all the way from defensive line to safety. You've got to do some improving there. You've got to add some youth, some athleticism, some speed. I think up front you need to add some power, some run stopping ability. It's been a while since the Steelers have had the guy that you just know is going to take up 2 or 3 blocks and stuff the run on first and second down. It's been a while since they've had that guy. So maybe they go that route this year as well. And, they've got some pieces to work with, but there's just going to need to be a lot of work in the middle of that defense for sure. And then on offense, you figure out the OC, you figure out the quarterback, and a lot of those issues on offense might fix themselves if you get a good system in place and a quarterback who can run it efficiently. Let's talk about those quarterbacks here. Brian Brown says, heaven forbid the Steelers bring back the quarterback we know works. And I don't mean Pickett. He's talking about Mason Rudolph, obviously. Brian Brown's been an avid supporter of Mason Rudolph, especially recently. What do you think about the Steelers bringing him back and giving him a chance to fight with Pickett, to battle with Pickett for that starting quarterback spot?
I think it's a bigger chance than what a lot of people think. There's been a lot of the, I've watched like some of these sports media guys that are out there in Pittsburgh, and I'll listen to these sports beat writers, and they'll say that, Rudolph is out of there. They have no interest in bringing him back. But yet, everything that I've heard from the team, the players, the coach, Mason Rudolph himself, it seems like the Steelers want to do business with him. Now, whether or not it happens, that's a different question, right? But I do think that they're interested in him. I do think that if they do bring him back, he's a guy that you probably want to compete with Kenny Pickett. The reason being is, if you're bringing in Russell Wilson, are you bringing him to compete for a starting position? Or are you bringing him in to be the starter? The same thing can be said for Cousins.
Yeah, exactly.
So Rudolph is probably one of those starters that you can see be somebody to compete for him, that it is going to be a competition. It's not going to be one way or another. There's not, at least this time around. I know that they've done this before and it really wasn't a competition then, but at least this time around, I think that they can have a fair competition. And I think that if Mason Rudolph feels that he can have that fair competition and a fair opportunity to start, I think he's going to come back. It also probably depends on the offensive coordinator, the scheme, things like that they want to run, and their preference in quarterback. But I wouldn't be surprised if he comes back, to be honest with you.
Absolutely. Hey, let's play a little game of either or here with you. So let's say the Steelers do hire Clint Kubiak as their offensive coordinator. Would you rather have Mason Rudolph back in the black and gold, or would you rather not sign him and then sign Sam Darnold with Clint Kubiak as the offensive coordinator?
Sam Darnold.
Okay. Take Darnold over Rudolph. I would too. I agree with that.
Oh, you said Rudolph or Pickett? I'm sorry.
No, would you re-sign Rudolph, or would you let him walk and then and sign Sam Darnold with Clint Kubiak as your offensive coordinator?
In that
Darnold
situation,
competing with Pickett.
Yeah, in that situation, I would probably want Darnold, just because of the relationship that he has there. He already understands the playbook. But in that situation as well, if you're Coach T, you're bringing in somebody who's bringing in that quarterback. I don't really think there's a competition there. You're going to see. Who do you think Kubiak's going to lean towards as far as who he wants to be the starter? The guy that he's worked with, knows the system. He's been with him for a while, or the new guy that has had 24 games under his belt and hasn't looked very great.
Yeah, definitely Darnold in that type of situation, for sure. It is interesting when you consider the fact. I really think, like, if the Steelers bring back Mason Rudolph, then that's their free agent addition at quarterback. They're not going to bring in another free agent there. They'll probably draft somebody at that point. Joe Milton III in the 4th round. I'll take that any day of the week with that type of situation. But hey, let's do this real quick, Daniel. We'll keep talking about the quarterback situation and the Pittsburgh Steelers here on the second half of the show, but we're going to go ahead and take a quick break here on the audio side. If you're listening live, we're not going anywhere. Stay put. We'll be right back here on the Steelers Q&A. All right, and we are back here on the Steelers Q&A Sunday night, talking offensive coordinator, talking quarterbacks, answering your questions in the live chat. We appreciate you all coming onto the show and giving your input and everything. Hey, let's talk about keep talking about the Mason Rudolph situation here. Do we think the Steelers will bring back Mason? We talked about that, that there's been conflicting reports, but that from inside the building, it does sound like that they are very interested in bringing him back. And so we're going to have to see. I think that he is going to be high on their list of those mid-tier free agents. If they're not going to be able to land a high-end free agent, and I don't know how many of those there are, maybe just one and Kirk Cousins, and he's going to command almost $35-40 million a year. I don't know how the Steelers make that work. So I'm really just thinking about this from the perspective they've obviously invested draft capital in Kenny Pickett. It's been 2 years with the worst offensive coordinator in the league. So they're probably sitting in buildings saying, well, we can't really evaluate him in full yet. Let's get in a guy with a proven track record of calling plays and scheming up offense, and let's see how he does in that. And that's year 3. And you bring back Mason Rudolph, or you don't get Mason Rudolph, so you bring in a Jacoby Brissett, or you bring in a guy that's going to be kind of the veteran mentor to Kenny Pickett for a year. And then from there, you make your decision. Are we going bridge quarterback? Are we drafting somebody high? However it plays out. That's how I kind of see things going here. So I don't think the Steelers bring back Mason and go get another free agent quarterback. I think it's Mason or any from a list of other players, and that's kind of how they will handle business there. But as far as the quarterback situation goes, that's obviously going to be the big talking point all offseason. But, the Steelers did invest a lot in Kenny Pickett, and they're going to try to see how it plays out. And, if they think that the offensive coordinator was the bigger issue, then Kenny probably gets a third chance here. What do you think?
No, I don't think he's going to have the biggest chance that you're thinking. In Tomlin's presser, he said that, he was QB1. It's a big year for him. And those things are true, regardless if he was the starter or the backup. Year 3 is a huge year for anybody who was drafted in the first round. When Mason Rudolph was in a similar position back in 2020, offseason 2021, when they drafted Pickett and he was the only quarterback on the team, he was talked about as being QB1. And Kevin Colbert talked about how if they had to start a game that week or that day, that they'd be comfortable with him and, giving him his flowers. And sure enough, he really didn't even belong in the competition. He wasn't really thought of in the competition there. So when I hear Mike Tomlin go in there saying, yeah, he's QB1, but certainly there's going to be some major competition coming in, that tells me that, I think that there is going to be some true competition and he's going to have to show up. Now, I don't know about I know that Tomlin says he has the intangible stuff, right? The no blinking, not getting tight, but it's the tangible stuff that he kind of lacks. And I'm not sure he's going to be able to outshine some of these other guys, whether it's Rudolph, who has a bigger arm than him and who's more accurate down the field, or anybody else who in shorts is going to show better than him. So I don't necessarily think that that's the case. Now, could they, because he's a first round pick and all this, like as you mentioned, maybe, I had heard, I don't know how good they were, but I heard some rumors that the Steelers were considering benching Pickett before firing Canada, and ended up turning out to be that. So, if they were already going to that and benching him, that's not a good sign. He's had 24 games. You can walk into a good game. You know what I mean? Eventually, just kind of with a blindfold, you can just accidentally bump into a good game. And really, he never had one of those breakout games. And I think he is what he is after 24 games.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you there. As far as we've kind of seen everything he can do, and maybe not in the best scheme, but he does have.
Let me ask you this real quick.
Limitations.
Do you think what you have in Mason Rudolph? Do you think what kind of, is he a QB2 to you?
He's a QB2 to me. Yes. I don't think he's a starter, but I could be swayed on that. To me, I think the Steelers have been so set back by the scheme that it's hard to really tell anything. I mean, George Pickens, we see the flashes of it, but the superstar talent that I think is there just hasn't really popped all the way yet. And I think that has to do with scheme. I don't think that necessarily has to do all the way with the quarterback. But I could be wrong about that too. I just don't think that he was utilized to the best of his ability. I don't think that Matt Canada utilized Kenny to the best of his ability either. So, and I'm not a Kenny truther over here. I'm just saying that the Steelers, put a lot of stock into him. He's the hometown boy too, if you will. And I just
No, I
think that he's
understand
going to
that.
get a third year when you look at the way it's all set up, unless they go after the big name free agent quarterback.
Right. No, and I understand that, and you're probably right there. But like I said, as far as was it the quarterback, was it the offensive coordinator in the past? There was a play in specifically against the Vegas Raiders where it was a slant play right in front of Kenny Pickett. He's looking at George Pickens. George Pickens is naked open, and he don't throw it. He turns around, runs around, and then throws it somewhere else. No, that's not on the coaching.
Right.
You have, after the Cincinnati Bengals game, George Pickens talk on his post press conference game and say, personally, Mason Rudolph took more shots. That tells me, because the question's been asked. Was it, did you guys become more aggressive? Did the Steelers become more aggressive, once Mason Rudolph got into the game, or was, that skill and play because of him? And I think that to a certain extent it is. Now, when you say that what we have in Mason, I feel that if we know what we have in Mason, we definitely know what we have in Kenny. Mason has had half the games. Mason hasn't had a single offseason where he's the guy. He hasn't had a single offseason where he's the guy and they tailor the offensive game plan again for him. He has had to work for, Ben Roethlisberger's game plan and Mitch Trubisky's game plan his entire career. And with that being said, in half the games than what Kenny Pickett has, he has a lot more of the numbers. I mean, I don't have them in front of me, but I can pretty much guarantee they're significantly higher than what Kenny Pickett has in the touchdowns and, yards per attempt and across the board, especially in the last few games. And so I'm not sure they're going to give him, that job, especially, I mean, how the fans were last year with the Fire Canada stuff. How long do you think they're going to give Kenny if he's struggling in his 3-and-out city over and over again? And we have a Clint Kubiak or one of these other OCs. How bad is that going to get?
Yeah. The first half of game 1, they'll be calling for his head.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. So, and there's a lot of support for Mason Rudolph amongst the fan base after what he did at the end of the year. And so I do agree with you, like the sample size for Mason has its own set of holdbacks, right? I mean, coming in for Roethlisberger in 2019 with let's be honest, an offense that was without Antonio Brown, without Lev Bell, it was not a good group. The offensive line was starting to fall apart. You didn't have much speed on the team. It was rough. So you got to give that into play. And then also considering the fact that he was overlooked because of that season. And then finally they went to him and all of a sudden the offense looks totally different. It does give you pause. And there's a lot of people that are saying, he's got a shot to be a quarterback that can take them places. I could see him being a starting caliber quarterback, but I don't see him being the answer to the Steelers getting into the AFC Championship game in 2024, if that makes sense. So that's why I would say, he's probably closer to QB2 than he is to a top 10 guy, a guy that's going to lead you to a divisional round appearance, an AFC Championship appearance. So it remains to be seen. Obviously, we will continue to watch this play out, and the first chip to fall has to be that offensive coordinator.
Oh, yeah.
All right, Daniel, let's move on to a question from Afton. She asked it a while back. If you could have anyone, who would be your coaching dream team? Let's just do head coach, offensive coordinator, and defensive coordinator here. Daniel, I'll go first, give you a chance to think about it. I've been thinking about this one for a minute. So I'm going to say Mike Tomlin's my head coach. I like Mike Tomlin. I think he's a great leader. I think that, he gets his team ready to play. Now, does he have some issues as far as scheming things up or picking coaches? We've seen some of that, but some of that has to do with ownership kind of tying his hands behind his back a little bit as well, I believe. So I'm going to say Mike Tomlin's my head coach. And then if I had to pick anybody right now, I'd take Ben Johnson for the Detroit Lions as my offensive coordinator. And then I would probably go get Brian Flores to be my defensive coordinator. He was on the staff last year. I think that they should have probably retained him if they could, and let him stay in-house as the DC, gave him a promotion there, and let Terrell Austin go. So I don't know. That's just my opinion, but I would go with those three guys as my coaching staff. If I could pick anybody right now, that'd be my coaching dream team. Danny, you got a coaching dream team here?
If they were all head coaches, like if I was using a head coach as an offensive coordinator and a head coach for a defensive coordinator, I can do that. You know, I too, I think that if that was the case, you know, because here's the thing, I would think that it depends on the situation, obviously. So if you have a defensive head coach, you need one very strong offensive coordinator to run the offensive side. But typically in those situations, you end up having those offensive coordinators leave for head coaching jobs. So typically right now, if it was just like, you know, I would probably go with an offensive head coach just so that wouldn't happen. But in a in a fictional world where I can choose whoever, I'd probably go with a Coach T also as a head coach, just because of the way he, you know, motivates and has the respect of his players and everybody across the board and across the NFL. And on the offensive side, I don't know, probably Matt LaFleur as the offensive coordinator. Defensive side, you know, I mean, I was going to go Brian Flores, but you already had said that, so I'm thinking, you know, I mean, I would probably go old school and go maybe get a Rex Ryan back.
Okay, yeah, somebody who plays a little fiery defense. You know, somebody who's gets some boys fired up. Old school, hard hitting defense. Yeah, I like that a lot. Okay, hey, let's do this. We've got another question from Russ Obenstein. Russ asks, has anyone looked at the draft yet? I like Lassiter from Georgia, O-line Frazier, center from West Virginia University, and Jeremiah Trotter, I think, is probably who he's talking about there. From Clemson, the linebacker. I've been looking into the draft. I'm sure you have too, Daniel. It's just, you know, part of the process at this time of year, and you start to kind of gather your thoughts on the class, kind of maybe more of a 30,000 foot view, right, of the draft class, like what positions are strong and deep, you know, the types of position groups that the Steelers might target based on their needs. And then also, you know, just looking at players that stood out from the college football season. And obviously most of the talk goes to quarterbacks there, but, you know, one of the guys that I think a lot of Steelers fans are going to be familiar with already is Frazier from West Virginia, because he plays a position of need for the Steelers. And then, you know, he's close. He's part of the backyard brawl. He's close to, he's a regional guy. So that's a guy that people are going to be familiar with. Tell us, Daniel, just a little bit about what you've done as far as draft look right now and what might be exciting to you about this draft class.
Well, I'll be honest with you, I'm more NFL centric, so the draft is something a little bit outside of what I look at. I've looked at a few things. I've looked at players. Right now, I've looked at Frazier. Isn't he on the shorter end? I think
so. I think he's like 6'1", 6'2", something like that. Let me take a look here.
Yeah. See, I'm not on the train of small, you know, centers anymore. After the Kendrick Green experiment, I rather have a guy that's going to be out there and getting the job done, and not going to be getting pushed back into the quarterback so often. Even Mason Cole is struggling with that. Yeah.
Let me take it back. He's 6'3", 310.
Okay,
so he's getting there. He's not a big center like who was the guy from Wisconsin last year that went to the Jets. 6'5", 320. Can't remember his name off the top of my head now, but yeah, he was a big center, and a lot of Steelers fans liked him last year. But so this guy not quite as big, but moves pretty well. You know, he's not as small as Green was, but
yeah. No, I mean, if he's not that small, then I mean, if he's actually 6'3", and that's not a fib, right. You know, that's around the size that you kind of want. I think he's been dealing with a knee injury, so you're probably going in with the season with Mason Cole, and you're probably not looking at him at all this entire year because, well, one, Coach Tomlin never plans for failure. So the team that he puts out there, he plans on sticking with that team the entire 18 weeks. 17 weeks of the season, right? You know, he doesn't have this plan where he's like, all right, I think that, you know, Levi Wallace is going to be slow after week 3, so we're going to start implementing Joey Porter. You know, that doesn't happen. His plan was that Joey Porter's going to, come in on certain stuff and, get him acclimated, but that these guys are going to be the starters. And then maybe next year, have a real competition. But because, his play was so much better than what the other guys were at, I think he kind of forced their hand, so to speak. And I think that that's going to be the case more or less, especially if you have this position with Frazier. He's not going to be a guy that's going to be capable of starting. Tomlin is huge on developmental phase of football and the rookies being a part of that, which is training camp and things like that. So if you go out there and get a Frazier, there's a good chance you're not going to see him until next year. So
yeah,
you know what I mean? I'm not sure that's the route you want to go. What round do you think they'd get him in? Like the third or fourth? You think he'll last there?
He probably end up being a second or third round pick. Yeah, is my guess. Because he's going to top out the class probably at center or be right there.
Yeah.
So he's going to be one of the top two guys at that position. And so, a teams start to go after positions of need in that second round a little bit more. So you might start to see those centers go off the board a little bit quicker. I think he'd be one of the first couple to go.
Yeah. I mean, you're selecting him with one of your first, probably top 100 draft picks. You have a lot of holes to get somebody that's probably not going to be able to play into the following years that I think you need to fill in, even if you can get a center, in free agency. I think that might be the better route when it comes to that position, unless there's another center. Yeah, it'd be cheaper too. Yeah. Unless it could be cheaper, unless there's a center out there in college that is, really, really good, but somebody that can really come in and possibly be a guy starting in training camp. Because I think that's what you need, for the Steelers to have somebody to start in that position right away, especially the center position. I mean, the calls and everything that has to happen from that position, from as far as a preparation standpoint and knowledge standpoint, it's a very important position. So I wouldn't see somebody coming in with an injury and not being in training camp playing at all at that position.
Yeah, I agree with that. I look back to what the Steelers did with Kendrick Green, where they converted him to center and said, "You're our starter."
Yeah,
that would be what they need to do. Only they need to have a better player than him going into that. So definitely something to consider there. All right, let's pull up this question from Tom. Tom Vallejo says, "What players do you think played their last game here in Pittsburgh this year?" Daniel, anybody, maybe a couple players that come to mind that you think are not coming back, whether it's somebody that could be traded, somebody that could be cut, or a free agent that's definitely not coming back?
I don't think Mitch Trubisky's coming back.
Yeah, I agree with that.
That's the big one. Juice Core
Yep.
Made it sounds like he's one of those that's going to be a hostage if he stays. You know what I mean? So I think he's going to find his way out. On the defensive side, I think that you're looking at. Well, I mean, I think that Quan Alexander's not going to come back. I don't think any of the other guys that were signed afterwards either. Levi Wallace, I don't think he'll be back. I don't think Casey will be back either. I mean, he might be. Is he on contract for next year?
He is. He's got 1 year left. It wouldn't save him a ton of money to cut him, but they could cut him and free up a roster spot for somebody younger, probably.
All right. Well, I'm not sure if he's a guy that makes the 53. I don't think he'll get cut before then. I think he might be a guy that goes to training camp. If they get somebody in the draft, they'll probably, go away from him. Yeah, about it. I think that for the most part. Well, Allen Robinson, I don't think he's going to be back. He's going to get cut. I forgot about him.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you?
Allen Robinson. I was going to say, Patrick Peterson, I think there's a chance that he might get cut at the price he's going to. I think he's $9 million against the cap this next year. And so they might ask him to take a pay cut or say, thanks for teaching Joey how to be a professional corner. We don't need you anymore. That could be the case as well. So, but most of the guys you mentioned are the guys I would expect. There's a chance they they could move Deontay Johnson this offseason, but I mean, Mike Tomlin's loyal to his guys too, and I think that they like to let players play out their contracts. So they'd have to get blown away by an offer. They'd have to get somebody desperate for a wide receiver that's willing to give them a big, a nice pick or a couple picks or something like that for DJ. But he's a guy that could be moved with some of the things that went down this year. But you start getting into, okay, they're going to cut Allen Robinson. That's probably a guarantee. You start moving too many guys and you have zero continuity coming back for a position group that has lacked some continuity and stability anyway. So maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's a bad thing. The Steelers will have to make that choice, but I think that those are kind of the big deals there at players. I think we've mentioned most of the guys who won't be back. I really do think that the Steelers' biggest needs right now reside on the offensive line. If you're looking at that side of the ball outside of quarterback. So they definitely need a tackle, right? Another tackle to bookend with Broderick Jones, wherever he ends up playing. I would hope that they would move him back to the left side and let him be the starting guy there all off season, and then draft somebody or bring somebody in to play right tackle. That would be my preference. But it's a Steelers team that they do have a lot of holes. But everybody's going to have a lot of holes right now, and there's going to be a lot of changes, a lot of players that we didn't think would be released that are going to be released and become free agents. A lot of players that aren't going to get signed to big contracts like they want to, and they're going to come cheaper at the end of free agency. There's a lot of those types of variables that come into play. So the Steelers have routes to add enough players and enough talent to be good this next year. So we will see how it all plays out, Daniel, but I appreciate you coming on the show, man. It's been a lot of fun. Appreciate the comment section being busy tonight and giving us a lot of good questions to answer, a lot of things to talk about. Daniel, why don't you go ahead and pitch anything that you are working on right now? The podcast, if you're doing any writing, whatever you're doing, man, go ahead and plug it here while you're on the show.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much. So on the audio side only for Steel Curtain Network, I do a Friday show called State of the Steelers. It airs around noonish. Go check that out. During the season, it's a little bit of a preview show. It's on the audio side only, so you can only check it out there. Get it wherever you get your podcast. Just look up Steel Curtain Network and State of the Steelers. And here on YouTube, you'll see me again tomorrow night here on Steel Curtain Network with Shannon White on The Hangover. We're going to be talking probably a lot about the same topics that we're talking about now, talking about how this championship weekend went and how the Steelers compare to those teams.
Awesome, man. And great stuff as always. Anytime I get a chance to listen to your stuff, I really enjoy it. So great work as always. Thank you for coming on the show. And thank you to all the listeners who are in here listening live. If you missed it, you can obviously check it out on audio. But when you're doing that, just know that you can come check us out live on YouTube around 8:30 every Sunday night for the rest of the offseason here, unless otherwise notified, and we will notify you if the schedule changes at all for breaking news or anything along those lines. That's going to do it for us here on the Steelers Q&A. We'll see you next time. Have a great week ahead.